Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3. Good.
Welcome to the Carnegie Town Hall. The meeting will begin in 1 minute. Why am I hearing my voice? I bet I do. Like what? Thank you, Dean. Jeez. Isn't it? That was it. I used this for something else, and I forgot I turned the volume on. That should tell me that. Right, it's 4 o'clock.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Carnegie for our Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting. Welcome to everybody in attendance and those that might be watching on CityLink. We appreciate your interest in our city government. We have a very full agenda tonight for the 4 o'clock meeting especially, and the 4 o'clock meeting will be followed by our Public Services Committee meeting, which also has several items on their agenda. We'll start tonight with our staff report from Jim David, our Legislative and Operations Manager. Jim.
Good afternoon, Jim David, City Council staff. The 2015 legislative session continues to move forward in Pierre. Last week was the deadline for bill introductions, and tomorrow will mark the halfway point for the session. Thus far, there have been 430 bills introduced this year. One of these bills is House Bill 1106. It establishes the right of local officials. It might be called reestablishing the right of local officials, and this is a direct result from the Hanson versus Minnehaha County decision. The bill has cleared the House with only one dissenting vote. It now moves on to Senate local government. House Bill 1167 would allow postings of legal publications online in lieu of newspapers. Under this proposal, citizens would still have the right to request a legal publication, but it would be by mail or by email. This bill will be considered in House local government at 10 a.m. on Thursday. And just in discussions with our city clerk's office, Sioux Falls spends between $70,000 to $80,000 per year on legal publications, not including elections. Senate Bill 102, as many of you had witnessed over Municipal Day, was defeated in committee last week with only one yes vote. This bill would have significantly changed how tax increment finance districts are funded. And then finally, Senate Bill 135, this is the local third penny for infrastructure bill. This proposal was approved yesterday on the Senate floor, 19-14, with I think 2 abstentions or 2 excused absences. It now moves to the House. If approved, the temporary tax must be for a specific purpose. It must be approved by the local governing board, and it must be approved by a majority of the voting citizens. The tax ends once the project is paid. We also continue to monitor the competing highway bills, Senate Bill 1, which originated in the Summer Study Committee led by Senator Valley, and House Bill 1131, which is the governor's highway proposal. Senate Bill number 1 was approved by committee and now moves over to the full Senate. House Bill 1131 was referred to House State Affairs and is awaiting a hearing in that committee. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Questions for Jim? I guess I got one to remind me again the process for the infrastructure penny. Has that gone to a House committee yet?
Yeah, it was actually approved on the Senate floor, so it was approved by the Senate committee last week. Yesterday it was approved by the full Senate, so now it goes to House, probably House State Affairs.
State Affairs.
Yep, that
okay.
Committee.
Okay.
So we haven't received word on the date of that hearing yet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jim. All righty. Fiscal Committee had a meeting last week. Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. Yes, the fiscal committee did meet last week. It was pretty fast and furious. We had a short amount of time available, but in essence, what we covered was some information from Dave Bixler, our budget analyst, about 2015's budget. And the effort really was to come up with almost what would appear to be a pocket-sized version of the budget for just 15, because a lot of us get asked questions about, when is that road going to start, or are we doing 12th Street, 10th Street, the bridge, whatever project it might be, as well as some trends from years in the past. So David prepared a little summary of the 2015 budget. The audit committee members were really just in a rush to review it, but we're going to review it further, and if we modify it and upon recommendation, we'll get it to the rest of the council members, and hopefully they'll find it as a useful tool as they move through the 2015 budget. Any questions on that?
Questions, anything to add, comments? Thank you, Councilor Jameson. We're at the point now where we come to our city council open discussion. Councilors, anything that you would like to bring to the council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, I've just simply got a question for you, actually. And last week, you excused yourself when we started talking about the ambulance, because
Yes, sir.
Are you going to do the same thing tonight, Dean?
I am. I was involved in most of the process and the selection as far as the looking at the proposals, and also I was involved in the interview process of all the proposers, which wasn't a public, open for public discussion or comment. It was closed, so because I'm privy to information that the rest of you were not able to partake in, I am going to be recusing myself for that matter.
Okay. And if I could just ask you one more question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just very curious here about the scoring by points. If I can just give you an example here. For clinical, how did you score clinical for each of the ambulance services? How did that work? I'm just curious.
Councilor Staggers, you're putting me on the spot here, and I'm not prepared to answer that. And
okay.
actually, I think that would probably be a better question for Jill Franken tonight, the health director, to ask her basically how they define clinical processes, what was used. I'm hesitant to give that because I might give it wrong.
Okay.
I understand that I was the least technical person on that committee. All of them had
You're
backgrounds.
the best person.
Yeah, had backgrounds in emergency medical services and/or health care. So I had a severe learning curve, and from what I understand, my scoring was pretty close to online with what the rest of them did. So that made me feel pretty confident about the process itself. So I can give you that much.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You bet. Councilor Erickson.
Just wanted to bring this up, and I think maybe I've had the chance to tell each of you. I have requested to have Darren come for an informational and give us some more information about the TIF process and the application process. I know he's mentioned some changes, and there was a presentation done to the Minnehaha County Commissioners, and I sent a few questions, and so he plans to be here in the next couple of weeks. This is my TIF folder, and so my hope is that this folder can be a one-page go-to, that it will just be a spreadsheet of what each project is and just a highlight of when it started, what's the savings, the impact, etc. So just bringing that up here in our open discussion, that's something that will be coming in an informational in the next couple of weeks.
I believe that's next week, right, Jim? Yes, so we'll have that next week, and I think it's a great idea because even as a council, we have not had the discussion about TIFs for 20 months, I think was the last time we did a TIF, and it's just good for all of us to refresh, so thank you for requesting that. Council, any other open discussion? Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wanted to jump back to Councilor Stagger's question about recusing yourself. You'll be recusing yourself based on information that you have about that project, not, I mean, we often, like Councilor Stagger stepped out the other night when we voted on land owned by his employer. I've stepped out when we've done rezoning for land owned by my employer. Others, we step out for various reasons because of financial.
I have absolutely no personal interest in this contract, no. It's simply because of the Supreme Court ruling back in October that because I was party to information that the rest of you did not receive, and that was not done in an open format, that it could bias my vote.
Sina, I'm just commending you on that. I appreciate you being that open and clear about that. But I also want the public to understand why we step out, that it really is either about financial things or in light of right now, that current Supreme Court ruling in terms of us knowing, individuals knowing different things than others might. Recusing ourselves doesn't have anything to do with perhaps committees that we're involved with or anything like that. It really has to do either with that financial, that wishy-washy area or this point here.
And it's with legal contracts and licensing would be the two circumstances when it's a contract or a license that we would have to do that, is where that ruling comes from. Councilor Rolfing.
And that, the way I understand it, anytime we would get information, if we would solicit or get information of any kind that was not part of an open meeting, whoever gets that kind of information should recuse himself, because that's what the Supreme Court said.
If it involves a contract or a license. Yes, sir. Any other open discussion? All righty, good discussion. Thank you, everybody. We'll head straight into our presentation. Our first one is a proposed transfer of uptown property for office development, and Brent O'Neill from our Economic Development Office manager there will present this. Welcome, Brent.
Hi, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Brent O'Neill with the Economic Development Office, and given your long agenda, I hope this is by far the briefest, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. Are really here to tell you we're near the finish line on a project we've been working on for some time, and that is a property in the uptown area that's city-owned that we've been working on a development project on there. And so I want to start with just giving you a little bit of background, ask you to kind of focus in on where that green star is, property just to the west of Falls Park. It's on the new Phillips Avenue that exists in that area. Here's a snapshot of that particular property that's in question, a very small property that largely has been considered too small or too awkward to develop, but a couple years ago we did feel that could turn into a project. So in the spring of 2013, the city did issue a request for proposals for that property to be sold and developed. We received two proposals, one from GNS Partners and the other from AR Properties, who was the one through a committee process that we ultimately selected. Just for your reference, AR Properties, the principal there is John Brown with Stockwell Engineers, and Stockwell Engineers is actually kind of the impetus for this project. We've had several discussions over that period since that proposal was selected. We're now again at that point where we're ready to execute our agreements, and that can start as soon as tonight. Is kind of why we wanted to give you this brief snapshot. Jumping ahead to what to look for as far as the major terms, and we'll give you more detail when the time is right. But this property is about 2/3 of an acre. $7 a foot is the agreed upon price. So that amounts to roughly $195,000 that this property would sell for. As a condition of selling this property, the future owner would be required to develop and build a project on that. The concept submitted with this proposal was about a 10,000 square foot, 2-story building that would go on that parcel. And then one other detail that's important now is right-of-way vacation is necessary in that area to make the property fit the way it needs to. There's kind of a site layout that's rotated a little bit, but that's how the building would fit on the site. And then again, there's a snapshot of what that 2-story building would look like. We think it's a real nice addition to downtown, that uptown area, and to an entrance to Falls Park. So that leaves us with kind of the next steps and where we go from here. We're really about to that point of turning it over to the council and asking you guys to make a decision to go forward. Vacating the right-of-way adjacent to that property is one of the key next steps, and then approving the actual purchase agreement so that that sale can go forward. So tonight, engineers will be here talking about that right-of-way vacation, and they'll want to set a notice of hearing for a March date. And then March 3rd, we'd like to come back to talk to you about that actual agreement and do the first reading on the ordinance that'll be required to sell that property. And then we'll work with your staff on scheduling that second reading and actual hearing on the right-of-way for the 10th. So if everything goes according to plan, we'd be looking at closing the land sale in early April, and then we hope as soon as the weather's appropriate, the construction would start thereafter. So with that, I would answer any questions at this time, and I turn it back to you.
Right, Counselor Staggers.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, Brent.
Sure.
With that sculpture that we have in that area, is that going to be taken out, or what's going to happen
Yes,
there?
I'm actually very glad you brought that up, because I meant to include that in my presentation. Yeah, that will have to be moved or relocated in order for this project to work, and we've contemplated that in the agreement, so that is something that would occur, yes.
And then finally, are there any environmental issues with the land itself?
We are very confident for the most part. It's clean, and when I say clean, I don't mean to say it's perfect corn land out in the county. It's it's in an urban environment, but we do think relative to other properties where we've had environmental conditions, this one is relatively clean.
So we're not going to get stuck with cleaning it before we turn it over or anything to city?
That's the way we understand that it'll be able to go forward as is.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. Did we base our decision, you said you had two proposals. Did we make our decision based on the dollar amount offered or based on the project itself?
Both. The offering price is a consideration, and it weighs against what we consider the quality of the project. In this case, there were two proposals. One actually proposed a development. The other was wanting it just for the acquisition's sake of it. And it was really our department's belief that, the reason we were doing this was for redevelopment. And so as we factored that in, we really felt that the quality of project was good, and that's why we selected it.
And $7 a square foot is a very good price from my understanding of the current market. Can you put up the map and show us where the right-of-way that will be vacated is? Is that on one of those maps that you have?
It is, and I actually kind of created a separate slide just in case this question came up. And Public Works will have a much better slide tonight, but back in the days before Falls Park was there, you took a different route to get to Falls Park from the core of downtown. So that's kind of a remnant piece on the west that's really obsolete now that Phillips Avenue is there. So that is the piece we'd be looking at.
There's no utilities or anything in that right-of-way?
There are some utilities there, but we've been working with, again, the Public Works folks, the property owners, and all the utilities there. So that will be worked out.
Okay. Counselor Staggers.
Yeah. Brent, what was the other bid for this property?
I do not have that number with me, and to be honest with you, Councilor Staggers, kind of our policy is we reveal the selected proposal, and we keep all other proposals confidential. It's just part of the bid laws and rules we follow. So I, one, don't have that number with me, and two, I would have to confirm with our finance and legal people whether that's even public information.
Let me ask the question then.
Yeah.
Can I assume it was more than
Yes.
$195,000?
Yeah, it was $195,000. The other proposal was additional dollars, correct?
More. Okay.
Counselor Jamison.
Thank you, Brent. Can you go, was there a map of the layout? Would
it be this one?
Yes, so the parking would actually be on the other side of the greenway. Am I seeing that right? The road is on the bottom here?
Phillips Avenue is up on the bottom.
Right.
This is conceptual, but pretty close to what we think will be the final. And so there will be some straddling of that western property line where we're asking for that right-of-way to be vacated.
Very good. The apartments that are further down, I think that Lloyd has, I was surprised by how close that parking is right on Phillips there.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I just didn't look close enough when the plans were getting drawn, but it just seems a little tight, so I'm glad to see this reversed. The other was, I think I heard you right say that you weren't actively trying to sell this land. Somebody had come to you and said they'd like to develop it.
Correct.
And proposed an idea and makes sense to you and us. people who proposed it, are they the ones who were awarded the contract?
Yeah, when we did get some interest, someone said, hey, we think we could develop there. Would you guys make it available? And the decision was, yes, we'll make it available. It's got to go through a competitive process, including compensation for the land as well as developing a project and the quality of the project.
And then with the real estate division that's within the city hall, apparently they must have reviewed these numbers and said, you know what, that's a good price, you guys did a good job, or they were involved.
Sure. We actually did three things there. The first is our real estate staff did kind of give us their ballpark estimate of what this land would be worth.
Okay.
The proposer actually submitted a market analysis that a realtor firm in town had provided. And then the third thing was we ultimately hired an appraisal to substantiate this price. So we've done all those things, and this $7 is, it's a fair deal for the city.
I agree. I think you did a fine job then.
All right. Thank you.
Whenever I look at a picture of this, I always got to decide, did an engineer draw it or an architect draw it? Because an engineer always puts north on the top side, and an architect, you never know which way you're going. Right, Mr. Cotter? Any other questions? All righty. Thank you very much, Brent.
All right. Thank you.
A few weeks ago, we had a first reading on some changes to our Shape Places ordinance, and our second reading was delayed at the request of the council so that we could have a presentation, and that is tonight on those proposed ordinance changes, and Jason Bieber will be discussing our amendments to Shape Places. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Jason Bieber with Planning and Building Services. I'm happy to be here today to provide a little bit more in-depth look at our proposed ordinances regarding our changes to the Shape Places. As you may realize, this is our second change that we have proposed. The first was approved back in October of 2014, so this will be our second round proposed ordinance amendments. And tonight we're going to kind of run through roughly 6 different areas of the ordinance that we are proposing to amend. The first one is reorganizing and clarifying some bulk regulations for the following forms. The MD1 and MD2 forms, those are strictly multiple family residential forms. The NF1 and NF2 form, which are neighborhood facility uses. The BCF2 and BCF3 forms, those are usually used for office and institutional uses. And then the RE2 form, which is retail uses. This is actually the bulk of most of the pages within the ordinance, roughly 7 of the pages, and what we're proposing here is just to clarify some of the things within this bulk regulations to make them a little bit easier to use for citizens as long as staff. Not really any changes in the intent of it at all. Next, we're proposing to amend the RE6 form, which is allowed in the village and the downtown planned unit developments. This form is predominantly used in the downtown area. This is what you'll see a lot. And the major use that we are looking at revising within this form is the spacing requirement for the full-service restaurants. So you can see there's some examples of what we would classify as a full-service restaurant, Minerva's and Parker's. And currently, the ordinance requires a 250-foot spacing requirement from these uses to any sensitive land uses, which include single-family, multiple-family, and schools, parks, kind of a thing. The reason why we're proposing to eliminate this is to make it more consistent with the on-sale alcohol use within this form. Those are kind of classified as bars. You can see some examples of some of the bars we would call on-sale alcohol beverage establishments. Currently, this form requires a 0-foot spacing requirement. So we, as a staff, felt we should make these consistent, and full-service restaurants are probably a little bit less intensive than bars. So why would they have a spacing requirement and bars would not? So we're proposing to make those consistent. Next, we're proposing to clarify the forms that are actually allowed within the S2 institutional PUD. We have the allowed forms in 2 different sections of our ordinance. One of the sections allows roughly 13 forms, and then the other section allows 16 forms, which doesn't make any sense. So what we're doing then is trying to make them consistent and allow the same forms in each section, which would be the 16 forms. Not adding any, just kind of correcting it. Next, we're looking at editing and clarifying some buffer yard requirements. Some of the sections are very difficult to understand for staff and the public, so we're looking at trying to make those a little bit easier. We're also proposing in the level B buffer yard to add the option of a 4-foot screen fence instead of a 2-foot berm. We've ran into a lot of issues with berms not being are required to do berms, or they can't do berms in certain areas, specifically having to do with drainage areas. So we have decided that it'd be a good idea to allow them the option to do a 4-foot screen fence. And then in the level C buffer yard, we would allow, instead of a 4-foot berm, a 6-foot screen fence. Staff feels that this will still provide the necessary buffering between these uses and single family and 2-family residential uses. We also are looking at amending the pedestrian-oriented planned unit development zoning district to add a couple of additional forms. Currently, it allows all of the retail forms except the RE5. We are proposing to add that to this specific zoning district. The RE5 form does allow retail over 75,000 square feet, essentially unlimited. And currently, it does allow all of the multifamily except the MD3. We are proposing to add that also to allow them to do some of the higher density multifamily uses. We wanted to run through some of the benefits of this pedestrian-oriented plan unit development. As we go through some of them, the pedestrian-oriented plan unit development does encourage mixed use and provides flexibility. It does require pedestrian orientation and does promote active and lively urban environments. And then just to give you kind of an idea of what the approval process is for a traditional zoning district, if we rezoned a parcel to RE3, which would allow the MD3 form, or the C4, which would allow the RE5 zoning, or the RE5 form, excuse me. Typically, those would be rezoned by council, and then they could come down and pull a building permit. If we would rezone to pedestrian-oriented planned unit development with these forms allowed, they would be rezoned by council. Then they would have to come back to the initial development plan, which is approved by the Planning Commission. Then a final development plan is required when they construct a specific building, and that's approved administratively through staff. And we look to make sure it's consistent with their initial development plan that was approved by Planning Commission. If there's certain thresholds that they've changed, like the size of buildings are too much, then they would actually have to go back for an amendment. And then they would pull a building permit. This is kind of an example of an approved initial development plan for Lake Lorraine. This is kind of where one of the examples of why we think it's important to add those forms to this specific zoning district. It allows us the ability to look in the initial development plan process to make sure all these pedestrian connections and make sure that the whole development is being looked at to provide pedestrians ways to get to every kind of a use on it. If you rezone portions of these out to say the RE3 or the C4, excuse me, the RE3 and C4 zoning district, we would lose that ability to look at the development as a whole. They would just come in and pull the building permit. So we feel this gives us a better way to make sure that it's meeting the extent of the pedestrian connections and providing parking for the entire development. And then finally, we are looking at doing some modifications to screening of dumpsters and outdoor storage areas. One of the major questions that staff was trying to answer with this ordinance is screen the dumpsters from what? As a staff, we felt we need to screen dumpsters from the street right of way. And that's why we were adding the specific language from view of the street right of way to the specific ordinance, just to kind of get everybody on a level playing field that all dumpsters view from the public right of way will be screened. And then the purpose also is to make it more consistent with how we currently enforce this ordinance. That's kind of how we've been enforcing it as a city from this view of the street right of way. And that's for public and private entities alike. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Council. Councilor Staggers.
Yes. On the dumpster issue, the street right away, what about alleys? Are they considered streets, or how does that work?
If alleys are still alleys, they would be considered right away. So we would screen from the alleys also.
Screened from the alleys?
if they're considered right away with this proposal.
They are. Huh?
Counselor James?
I think last time we talked about this, we were looking for an updated sheet on any or all of the dumpsters that the city is in charge of that are either probably out of compliance. Did that get emailed to us? Did somebody update us on that? Do you have that information?
Mike Cooper does have that information and be happy to share with what we have currently with that
Perfect.
specific.
Welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. First of all, just to clarify, the alleys are not considered public right-of-way as far as this ordinance. So if you're driving down 8th Street and there's a dumpster adjacent to the alley and you can see it from 8th Street, then it would have to be screened. So that's the process that we have been using and that we would like to continue to use. Back to the city-owned facilities. Last year, we went through an extensive review of all city-owned dumpsters throughout every department, and a number of them were already planned to be modified based, again, on our current interpretation of the ordinance. And where we landed, as of today, is the Parks Department is the only entity that still has unscreened dumpsters, although they still comply with our current interpretation of the ordinance. So what we're saying today is that we don't believe that there are any city-owned dumpsters that are not in compliance with the current interpretation of the ordinance that are visible from a street right away. Now, the one that I think caught the most attention was within the parks last year, and we can put this in a spreadsheet together for you. Parks has 24 locations where dumpsters are screened. And again, because we've determined that those are visible from the street right away. There are currently 13 locations within the larger parks that are not screened. And of those 13 locations, 9 are actually more seasonal type uses that could typically be removed during the winter months. So to get back to Councilor Jameson's question, we're not aware that currently any city-owned facilities are out of compliance with the proposed intent of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Counselor Rolfing?
Stay there, Mike.
Yeah.
I had two questions, really three now come to mind. I'm going to start with just what you said. You're saying that because the dumpsters are taken out in the wintertime, they don't need to be screened in the summertime when they can be seen?
No. The 13 that are currently unscreened, we've determined that they're not visible from a street right away.
Got it. Okay.
And of those 13, 9 of them are actually seasonal in nature.
Got it. Okay.
But that's not the reason that we've said they should not be screened.
Right. Okay. Secondly, we've had testimony, if you will, from individual, or at least one individual here that has been fined because we didn't interpret, or we interpreted the new ruling or the new ordinance to be just visible. I mean, it didn't have to be, it didn't make any difference what it was. He had to put up a screen, but his was visible from the street?
Definitely visible from two street right-of-ways.
Are
Yes.
so we've been consistent with the enforcement of this and how we interpret it?
Yes.
And now we're changing it so that we don't have to go back and look at those people again.
Well, I'd say we're clarifying so that there's no question as to what the intent and what the enforcement process will be. Now, I'm not going to stand here today and say that there's not currently violations out in the community, but, you know, we haven't gone around and done a sweep of every dumpster to see if it's screened or not. We have done that with all the city-owned facilities, and like we do with other code enforcement, if there's a complaint or somebody brings one to our attention, we will go take a look at it.
One last one, if I could, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
On the change from a 2-foot berm or a 4-foot fence, a 4-foot berm to a 6-foot fence, the berms, that's what the height was on the berms originally? It wasn't 4 and 6 or something like that?
Yeah,
They're the same?
The reason that the berm is lower than the fence is that the berm would have landscaping on it.
Okay.
So it would
By
be-
taking out the berm, putting in a fence, can the people build closer to that in an industrial site or in a commercial site? Would that allow them
No.
building closer to the fence or to the next door neighbor?
the setback would still be the same.
Good, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Counselor Kiley.
A question again regarding the dumpsters in the parks.
Okay.
And this might be a combination of you, Mike, as well as Don. Has there been consideration of changing that policy for the dumpsters in the larger parks since the public is invited into the park? One of our goals is to keep our parks beautiful. But with that being said, a concern that I would have if we did screen them all, would that impede users of the parks from actually using the dumpsters for their intended purpose?
Well, I'll start out by saying the Parks Department has been very, very good at responding to, they're just saying, tell us what we need to do, and we'll do it. So over the last year or two, the Parks Department has gone back and retrofitted a number of locations because we've told them they need to be screened. So they're not resisting any of this. They're just saying, we want to follow the ordinance and tell us what we need to do. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part is that if they were going to go over and above this requirement, would that impede the users of the park? I guess I'll let Don or Dave maybe answer that one. I don't know.
Good afternoon, Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. Yeah, I think in a perfect world, they would probably all be screened, but as pointed out, some of these parks have, 2.5 to 3 months out of use. And then what we typically would do if we didn't have the demand for the dumpster, because the way it works is we take all the trash and recyclables out of our cans that we have throughout the parks and behind the backstops and those types of things. And then we pull the sacks out of those cans, and then they end up in the dumpsters, which end up getting dumped by our contractor. And so there are a number of things that we've done to become in compliance with the ordinance. And while they could be screened, some of those are going to be in place for 2.5 months. For example, at Colville, for example, the active use there is actually where the ball fields are in use. And so the majority of the use that drives the need for the dumpsters is only going to be in that 2.5 month range. There is general use, general recreational going on at those other parks, but it's really just a decision about whether or not we want to add those additional screenings.
So the dumpsters are generally used by the city employees and not the public?
Well, most of the time, yes.
All right.
We do get some sporadic dumping once in a while.
Well, my concern is that if we did screen a dumpster in the park, and if the individual has to open the gate to get in and then open the lid to the dumpster, that some individuals would just throw it over the fence, or it would just leave it outside the fence and it wouldn't be used for its intended purpose. So that was the purpose of the question.
Yeah.
But in some of those areas where, especially our popular parks, I would encourage that we maybe go above and beyond in some of those circumstances, especially the parks where maybe the weddings are going to be held and things of that nature.
Sure. We'll take another look at it.
Counselor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Don. I just want to clarify. If I own a business and I have a dumpster, I'm a private citizen or a private business, I own a dumpster and it's in an alley or someplace that can't be seen from the street, I don't have to screen it.
That's correct. And that's the case today.
And that's the same way that we're dealing with the parks. If I can't see it from the street, it doesn't need to be screened. Across the board, public, private, we're doing it the same way.
If it's behind a building, whatever, then it's considered to be out of sight.
I think that's the most important part of this conversation is that it is consistent, currently consistent across the board.
Yep. And
that we get kind of wrapped up in those folks who, don't understand that difference between what's a public right of way and what's kind of the backstage area for whatever.
So yeah, we're trying to make it, we're trying to keep it consistent, but just clarify what the intent really is.
Thank you.
Counselor Jameson.
Mike, this discussion on dumpsters is interesting. I don't have the ordinance in front of me that states the actual language and then how you interpreted it. But what was the language that, we did receive public input from an individual who had interpreted it differently. What was the language that was there before that that we're changing? I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Or roughly. I mean.
We're adding the phrase "from view of the street right away," and we're eliminating the language that says "with a gate with material similar in color, design, and composition to the primary structure." So, again, the main purpose of this is to clarify that language "from view of the street right away."
And you're confident in, like you say, the way you've currently interpreted it throughout and for years. And what comes to mind immediately was the boulevard discussion we had some months ago, and we all went into twitches about that, and I don't want to do that again. But as long as you haven't interpreted it, enforced it upon others in a manner that isn't current, I'm kind of I'm okay with your changes. And
yeah, this goes back to the current language goes back to the early '80s. And when we did shape places, we didn't really obviously look at it at this section of the ordinance. So it's been the same language for quite a few years.
Okay, one last question on shaped places. We'd had, or I have noticed a large, and maybe for Jason or for you, but a large number of increase in billboards. And it seemed to be that, I think we've talked about it, but could you help clarify the discussion of shaped places does not provide a new playground for billboards, or does it?
It provides for more possible locations, but there's still spacing requirements, there's still setback requirements. And we've actually had discussions recently with 3 different billboard companies that do work in Sioux Falls. And we're actually looking at working with them to come back with some additional modifications. And one of those could potentially be actually increasing the spacing requirement.
So you're saying that the billboard providers are the ones who are actually advocating for a further distance?
Some of them are, yeah.
Some are.
Yep.
Well, you'll consider that, and you'll include us in that conversation.
Yes.
I mean, okay.
You bet.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Rolfing?
Yeah, Don, curious as to, I think what you told me was that on Koval Lake Park, where the ball diamonds are up along there, that you were feeling that those did not need to be screened because they were out there for a short amount of time during the summer months, basically. Was that what I heard?
Well, it was just an example. I don't know I don't know actually whether we've actually screened those or not. They are. It sounds like they are, but in an example, there are times where we just said, you know, we really don't need to have that dumpster there at all. I mean, we'll just take it out, and we'll, from an operations standpoint, we'll just adjust and use another dumpster that's already screened that maybe is in a similar location, but we're just trying to right-size it a little bit. You know, if we know that we have to screen these dumpsters, would it be better just to eliminate it and have them haul it off, and we'll just adjust on the fly?
No problem. My concern was that you can't see, you cannot see, how do I put this? You can see every part of the park as you drive by that park.
Yeah.
So how could one not be, you know, so
Yeah.
it was just a comparison thing. Thank you.
You bet.
And just to belabor this a little bit, we can give you a chart that shows you every park dumpster, which ones are screened, which ones are not, and why they're not screened. So we can forward that to you.
Any other questions? Councilor Staggers?
Yeah, I've got to ask this question, and that is, we had a private individual fined $600. We didn't have anybody fined in the city when we were in violation, did we?
The process that we went through in that particular code enforcement was notification of the violation, an opportunity to correct the violation. When that time frame passed, then there was a citation. So there was multiple opportunities in that specific incident for the correction to be made.
And do we have the same process then when the city's in
Yes.
violation?
The city, whenever we notify Parks Department, then they get out and they correct it. The most recent one that we did was at the Orpheum Theater. There's a screen fence around that dumpster right now.
Okay.
If I could, I've got a couple. Since we're on the topic of dumpsters, just a reminder to the citizens of Sioux Falls that we don't have a code enforcement department that drives around and looking for people that are out of compliance with their dumpsters. If you're getting a knock on the door or something from code enforcement, it's because somebody complained about it. And if you see city dumpsters, Parks Department, school board, whatever, dumpsters that are out of compliance, please call it in. My commentary on that issue. The city doesn't own the dumpsters that are in the parks, do we? We contract for that service, correct? Okay. We require that they paint them a certain way to make them, or like paint the, no, we don't want to do that. Going back to the zoning change now, if I could, Jason, sorry. That was a slip, I'm sorry.
It happens.
Yeah. Okay, recollect. MD1, MD2, NF1, NF2, are these codes kind of universal as far as zoning goes with other municipalities? If a developer comes to town, do they look at ours and say, what do you guys have going on here?
I think the way that Sam from our department developed this code, this ordinance is pretty unique to Sioux Falls. I know that they went through hiring a consultant that gave them some ideas, looking at all these other cities, their ordinances. I think the planning department just said, those don't really fit with our city, so he developed something that's a little bit different than what most cities use. And honestly, it's worked out pretty well the last year. I think developers and citizens find it easier than our old ordinance. I think it just gives them more options, and it gives the protection that we said that was going to be in there with the buffering of these higher intensity uses to residential uses.
Okay. And we're creating an RE5, which is the same thing as a C4, but strictly for retail. Is that my understanding?
The proposal is, as we go forward, this is a little bit of a change from the old ordinance. We now have a three-tiered system. It used to be as C4, you could do these uses in C4. Under this new ordinance, you figure out what zoning you're in, and then there's certain forms allowed in a specific zoning district, which provide you that flexibility. This specific zoning ordinance is a PUD, what's called the Plan Unit Development, which allows roughly like 15 forms. You have twin homes all the way up to apartments. You have office, commercial. It allows that flexibility, but it also allows the city to be able to look at these developments as a whole and make sure that they work together. We are proposing to add those two forms to the other roughly 13 forms allowed within this zoning district, within this planned unit development. And as I kind of outlined previously, let me just kick it in here a little bit. It gives us the added approvals process for us to look at this thing. This whole development was previously zoned C4 until they rezoned it to PUD. If that's the case, they would be doing all of these things individually, and we wouldn't have any say or any ability to look at it to make sure that the pedestrian connections are there, to make sure the development functions as a whole. This way we have that ability to look at their initial development plan, to make sure it makes sense for this area. All their streets are connected, all of the parking is there, and everything works. And then when they make changes to this specific thing, they have to go back through the approval process. So it kind of gives us that extra chance to look at it, and not just once they zone it, they can go pull a building permit.
And when we do this, we're still eliminating a lot of the need for the conditional use permit, or are there CUPs?
There wasn't a conditional use permit in the C4 for the RE5 form. You could just go construct one of these buildings if it's zoned C4.
Okay.
But with us allowing that there, we are getting those other number 2 and 3 under the PUD zoning, we are getting those other approvals. If it's zone C4, you rezone it, then you go build a building permit. You go get your building permit.
Okay.
So we are allowing them the flexibility, but for the reason that we get added securities about the specific development. There's added things that they need to provide within this PUD.
And we couldn't add those restrictions to the underlying, we had to create new ones. And the reason I ask these questions is when Shea Places was brought to the council, it was really sold to me that it simplifies the process. We're going to have less forms, and now it seems like we're adding to it and making it more complicated again. So I'm just, are we trying to control this process?
Well, this specifically, under the old ordinance, we had 250 some planned developments. They were called. We went to this planned unit development, which I think we have 6 or 7. Similar kind of a thing. It's just a way for the developers to have flexibility, but also for us to have a little bit more control on how they're developing it. Those districts, so there's a little bit more approval, but straight zoning districts, we've made it a lot simpler.
Just don't want us to recomplicate it.
If I could just follow up real quickly. I think we're all still learning what this new thing is, but it is very simple because we have it with the charts. You have the list of zoning districts. Then you have the list of forms that are allowed within each of those districts. You can flip to a picture. It will show you exactly what that form is, what all the requirements are for that form. So it is more user-friendly, and more cities are going to this format of using forms. So that is really the trend that has been heading in the direction of even cities the size of Sioux Falls.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Erickson.
Just one brief question in regards to the buffer yard requirements, the berm or the screen fence. Who gets to pick that? Is it the developer? Or what if the particular neighborhood is like, we don't want a fence or we want the berm and it works? Is there input on that? How does that work?
That would be the option of the person developing the site. Currently, the reason why we've proposed this amendment is we've ran into a lot of issues where berms don't work or the neighbors want a fence, and we've made them, they'd have to go through planning commission to do what's called an alternative buffer yard plan. And they've been approved, through planning commission. So we decided why not just have that as an option? It seems more and more like single family neighbors would rather have a fence around it than a little 2-foot berm. So we said, here's the options you can provide, go ahead and provide them.
And then do they have to tell you what they plan to do as far as if it's a berm or a fence, or is it just a surprise?
As the permitting process, they will have a landscape plan that's signed off by the zoning department that'll show what they're doing. So, yeah.
And I like the option. I think it's a good option for our people that may not want to see it as much, or for the drainage issues. So I think it's a great option to add.
Are we done? All righty. Thank you very much. Good presentation, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Our last presentation for the evening is our capital surplus priority project, and I believe Mr. Turbach, Director Turbach, will be leading this off, and this is, of course, mostly related to the pool financing. Welcome, Tracy.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turbach with the Finance Office. We will be talking about the indoor aquatics facility, or I will be. We do have other members of the project team here as well, so if you've got questions that stump me, I'm happy to let them take a stab at those questions as well. Before I jump into my slides, I only have a few, and most of what I'm going to share with you, you've already heard before, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I did think that perhaps before I get started, for someone that, for the benefit of someone that may not be following this issue, just to kind of recap what brings us here today. On January 27th at your informational meeting, the Aquatics Facility Project team provided a fairly lengthy presentation on the project, demonstrating the results of the schematic design process and the due diligence work that had been ongoing during the latter part of 2014. Included in that presentation was a recommendation for an additional investment in the project of $3.9 million. And our recommendation at that time was to primarily fund that utilizing surplus capital dollars remaining from 2014. And again, we not only identified the need for that fund, but also offered what I think is a well thought out solution to that need. And at that time, the council indicated a desire to have us, have the city team provide some alternative projects, potential projects for some of those capital surplus dollars. And so we followed up with that request with a written communication early the following week, providing some other projects that the council might want to consider from Public Works. We also provided a written update on the amount of the capital surplus funds available from 2014, and also shared some of the discussion that we had had internally regarding other funding alternatives that we had considered in the process of developing our funding solution for the Aquatic Center. And then, of course, the night of the 2nd of February, the council had first reading on the supplemental appropriation ordinance. There was obviously some additional discussion on the project at that time. And at the council meeting on the 2nd of February, we were asked to come back to today's meeting to provide a review of the capital surplus funds, have some more discussion regarding the recommended use of those dollars, and then some discussion on some potential alternatives, as well as some of the funding alternatives that we had considered for the aquatics facility project. So that's kind of what brings us before you today. The discussion today, then, I will review the funding options that we did consider for the aquatics facility to achieve that $3.9 million need. I'll recap the recommended funding plan for those that may not be familiar with that. I'll touch on the highlights of the supplemental ordinance that will be on second reading tonight. And we can talk about the capital surplus funds that are available, and then we will also touch on the possible alternative uses of those capital surplus dollars. So in terms of the funding options that we did consider in developing our recommended funding solution, we did look at the possibility of borrowing the money. Of course, debt is one of those alternatives that we like to find better sources than borrowing the money. Typically, the city has been managed very prudently, I think, in the past, and has reserved debt for projects that cannot reasonably be done or achieved without borrowing, and that's in my view not the case here with the aquatics facility project. And so we didn't think debt was really warranted. In addition to that, we are talking about, in the overall scheme of things, a relatively small amount of money to be issuing bonds to finance, and that really becomes less and less cost effective the lower amount that you're trying to raise by selling bonds. It becomes less and less cost effective, and it really unnecessarily increases the cost of the project. So we discarded the possibility or the option of utilizing debt. We also looked at the Parks Capital Improvement Program, identified projects within that program that could be eliminated. We did identify some that could be delayed. However, but to go after all of that funding from the Parks CIP would really be devastating to their program over the next couple of years. And to put that into perspective, over the next, in 15 and 16, those 2 years, the Parks Department will invest about $10 million in neighborhood parks, picnic shelters, trail system, all of those things that the Parks Department is responsible for. And that to get almost $4 million out of that program would mean a 40% reduction in their program for the next 2 years. So we just felt like that was far too severe of an impact. It would put them behind in terms of keeping up with the needs of the community, and so we chose not to go that route. Another alternative that was considered, really the only other option in terms of the sales tax funded capital program, is Public Works. That's the only other piece of the pie that's really large enough where we could potentially get almost $4 million, and that was quickly rejected as a much less desirable option We did talk about it. We tried to throw all the ideas on the table, but that was just simply not as desirable as using what we knew was the unobligated surplus dollars that were available. One other possibility that we did talk about, and I know it's come up in your discussions, was the commitment that the city has made for the city-county project for the archive storage facility. And again, that option was not, didn't make the final recommendation, largely due to the strong council support that project has had in the past. We do have an agreement with the county to provide funding for that project, to share in the cost of that project. So we did not make that recommendation. So that really left us with the unobligated funds from 2014, and that really became, from my perspective anyway, the obvious choice on how to meet that need for the aquatics facility project, along with the fairly modest revisions or reprioritization to the parks program that we mentioned. So some of the driving points, I guess, in my mind are, one, those dollars are already available. They're there. We don't have to borrow them. Utilizing those surplus dollars does not disrupt other projects in the capital program, in parks, or in public works, or any other parts of the program. The council approved that plan just 4 or 5 months ago, and so it's we're certainly very reluctant to disrupt that plan that was just so recently adopted. So it's, from my perspective, and I hope you would agree, that it's easy to see how utilizing those surplus dollars kind of rose to the top and became the recommended solution for meeting that aquatics facility need. Just to recap very quickly, you saw this slide back in January. You know what we've got in the current budget and CIP, the additional need of $3.9 million, how we plan to fund that. That's our recommendation, is to utilize about $2.8 million in unobligated surplus from our capital fund, $500,000 from the Bradfield estate gift to the city, and then reprioritizing $600,000 of parks projects. So that's how we would get to the 3.9, as I think you're all aware. Very quickly on the ordinance, I mentioned this to you last week when the ordinance was on first reading. The supplement would be for the $3.3 million. That's the 2.8 in unobligated surplus and the $500,000 from the Bradfield estate gift. The ordinance also has sections authorizing contracts for the aquatics facility project that would provide for payments beyond 2015. That's a necessary provision of the ordinance because some of the project would be funded with 2016 revenues. And then with an abundance of caution, there's a clause in there that clearly limits expenditures on the project to the amounts that have been appropriated by the council. That's pretty standard operating procedures. So that's really what the ordinance will do. In terms of an update that I shared with you a little over a week ago on the amount of capital surplus funds that are available, we're estimating $3,450,000, recommending 2.8 of that for the aquatics facility. And then we do have, as I shared with you last week, information on public works projects. There would remain $650,000 available for those projects, and we would recommend that you move forward with that appropriation at some point in the future. We did take a conservative approach when we talked in January about the amount of surplus dollars that were available. When we first arrived at that 2.8 million, very early in the year, the audit still isn't complete yet. So we took a very conservative approach in identifying that 2.8 million. Following our meeting with you in January, we did have the opportunity to pull through the rest of what our year-end calculations and analysis is to determine what that surplus amount is, and that's why we've arrived now at an amount of $3,450,000. So to wrap up my piece, I did share the list with you that Mark Cotter had provided of alternative projects, and those are the ones listed on this slide. I know Mark has more more background and information for you on those individually, so I will turn it over to him at this point, and we'll walk through those. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and Council members. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. I do want to take you through the projects that were provided to you by Tracy, but also just to start off, you know, we certainly build a lot of projects in Sioux Falls. Public Works is involved from the beginning and fully respect the timing of getting a project started. We've been a part of the discussions, really feel like it's been a very methodical approach on finding the gap funding, and we're in full support of the recommendation that's come forward. I also want to provide, we've had a very active bid schedule for the last really 6 weeks. Right after the first of the year, we bid our 2 big flagship projects for the year. The first was 12th Street Bridge, and one of the things we learned with the 12th Street Bridge was we were aggressive on some of the scheduling, but also there's been about 5 bridge projects bid in the region that's taken some of the bridge contractor capacity away, which was one of the driving forces of why we did not receive bids on that project. We've gone back to those bridge builders and ultimately reevaluated that project. And we're going to build that now in 2 phases. We'll do the work that's not associated with the roadway or the bridge in the summer of 2015, and then in 16 we'll rebid just the bridge, taking in the feedback that we heard from those bridge contractors, and still be able to accomplish that project. The other key project that we bid was South Cliff Avenue. This was a substantial project, got very good competitive bids, and so really between those 2 projects we can really line up a nice capital project list of projects for us for the summer. Because we're taking a different approach with the 12th Street Bridge, at the top of the screen, those 3 projects, the 22nd and Minnesota Avenue project, these 3 were designed, and we're moving those forward to get those to the market. That one will bid on March 5th. The intersection of 11th and 2nd downtown, right next to the start of the viaduct, that will be bid on March 12th. And then the fairly substantial Solberg Avenue widening to correct not only the traffic capacity but significant drainage issues, that one will also bid on March 12th. So those projects have been moved back in as a result of reevaluating the 12th Street Bridge. Now to get started with the list of projects that Tracy asked us to provide in response to your questions. We've essentially lined up a list of maintenance, construction, and road designs for consideration. The first is Techcrete joint sealing and spot concrete repairs. This really focuses on extending the life of our concrete pavements, joint resealing and spot concrete repairs. There are, as you go back to this map that we'll refer to, and I have handouts for you, these particular projects are noted in purple, and those would be the ones that we would address with that Techcrete. Okay. The next project that we identified is the city has done a lot of work in the parks and in the neighborhoods to remove the accessible barriers, making very good progress. Last year you appropriated additional dollars for that. This is still a key priority for us, and I would expect within probably less than 3 years we will have removed all the barriers in the city. Then we'll start to go back after that, and some of the barriers that were not there, just the ramps are too steep, we'll start to go back and retrofit those. But between the park system and the street neighborhoods, a number of these are getting done, and so we elevated that project to continue that work. Critical designs that we've know are key and will require extensive property owner discussions are Louise Avenue between 41st and 49th Street. This street we overlaid with asphalt a few years ago, and it's certainly showing its wear. We want to get those designs done so we can actually get those plans ready for construction. And then Madison Street, essentially from Burnside, near the Dairy Dream area, all the way west out toward Louise. Those are key projects that we need to get designed and ready for reconstruction. Another project that Councilor Erpenbrock has brought up in the past and is needed, we've done the design. There's 7 phases of curb and gutter replacement work that's needed on Minnesota Avenue. Now that the design is done, this would get that process started. This is the most significant phase, and so we've added this one to the list. This one essentially, as you drive south of 26th Street on Minnesota Avenue, to see where when the pavement lanes were replaced, the curb and gutter was not, and it's deteriorated. Where there's a joint in the concrete pavement that needs to be replaced, dollar amount would also address that in those affected areas. All right, in the past we've done extensive work to Prairie. Prairie is a really good collector street, and so we're down to, I think, 2 blocks left to do any more joint and spall repair, so we elevated this project so we could complete that. We have 2 traffic signals that have met warrants, and we're working through the designs on both of these, 41st and Southeastern, and Benson Road and Westport. And then 2 right turn lanes that have been under-designed and are nearly ready to go. One is at 6th and Sycamore, and the other is at 37th and Minnesota. So that essentially gives you a picture. I think what I'll do is I'll go back to the map. But understand that Tracy and I are here to answer your questions.
Counselor Staggers, lead us off.
Yes, Mark, I was just curious about those red rubber mats that are placed on the sidewalk for the handicapped. So how long will those last?
You know, we've been putting them in for probably well over 10 years. I've not personally seen much from a wear and tear unless like a motor grader were to hit it if we were doing snow removal. Most of that's outside the driving lane. I would expect that it's probably going to last the life of the concrete, which should be, you know, all of 30 to 40 years. There are some cities that use cast iron. We didn't go that route. There's a lot of discussion with these tactile panels. But so far from what I've seen, and we've been using them for, I think, over a decade, they've held up very well. Yeah.
Counselor Jameson.
Mark, you say you have a map or a handout of this presentation somewhere?
I do. I've got it with me. I can have it handed out.
Jim, do you mind? Or?
And then I have questions for Tracy, I think.
Director Turbach.
Yes, sir.
Tracy, thanks for coming tonight to go through this list. You know, the email you sent had a lot of this information in it. I think it's just very productive to have it done in the format you've done. I think it's important for us. It's important for the public, so thank you for that, first off. A couple thoughts, if I could. Correct me if I'm wrong, first on the debt. Originally, we had proposed borrowing this money back in 2013, right? We were going to borrow it, but then we got paid back from the levy deal, and we decided not to borrow money, right? Originally, the plan was to borrow money.
A portion of it, right. There was, at one time, a plan to borrow as much as $13 million for the project.
13. And then just help me understand the interest difference between the loan that we have on the levies and if we were to borrow this new money today. And we're saving some money because we don't have to initiate the bonds and all kinds of things. But tell me how much we're saving.
How much we're saving by?
Roughly, by not borrowing the money and using the money that we were repaid from for the levies.
If we were to borrow for the entire project?
No, just that 13 or whatever.
$13 million? Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Just roughly. I mean, the idea is to...
Several million.
Yeah. Okay. That's what... Okay, and then one of the questions, last year, we had a healthy discussion about the surplus funds. I think amounted to 1.4 million, and that 1 million came from a land sale that we had right at the end of the year, and all of a sudden we wound up with $1 million. But that window was only 400 grand, and now we're at 3.4. Assure me that there weren't any projects that were eliminated last year, or how did we wind up with 3.4 this year in surplus versus the year before only with 400,000?
For the surplus this year, about 1.5 million, I believe, is the result of sales tax revenues coming in higher than anticipated. There's another 1.2 million that was the result of projects being completed in 2014 under budget, and so those dollars had been previously obligated for projects, but remained in the budget in 14, but were no longer necessary, so they could be released to be funded. That's the 2.8. There are some other unanticipated revenues from a couple different sources that came in that would account for the largest portion of that additional $650,000.
Okay, thank you. And you did have, I think, that in your, I'm sorry, I didn't remember you had that in your email regarding where those funds came from. But I was a little surprised by the amount compared to last year's surplus funds, so I was trying to get clarification. And then the other part is it was in the presentation that the outdoor splash area would be a bid or add-on or alternative project. From the beginning, there was always this outdoor little splash area that would be implemented with it. Now that seems to be put as a add-on feature later. Do we know or have an idea of what maybe that add-on would cost?
I think we probably do. I'm not sure that I do. I don't know if anybody from the, can you address that, Don?
Yeah, the estimate is right in that $450,000 to $500,000 range. But we're going to design it. The plan is to design it, to install it. We're going to bid it as an ad alternate, and depending on how bids came in, we'll determine whether we can do that now or do it later.
You know, I've I'll just do a shout out that I think we should include that. I mean, I think that was a wonderful feature for a lot of people who don't want to be indoors. I hate to see it left off because we couldn't afford it after we've gone through all of this to wind up with a second-rate, something that we really should have. And I guess I want to push for that. Let's include that. Let's make sure we get it funded. That's my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Don.
Councilor Anderson?
John Kearney, please. Don, with this $600,000 from 2015, 2016, what projects does that affect?
The 2015, 2016 projects, really looking at a couple projects to come up with that $600,000 that's identified on the slide on the screen. One of them is our park maintenance headquarters building right on 6th and Phillips. We talked about doing some renovations to that building. It's primarily circulation and kind of building out some of the back end of our unfinished office space that we have there. And so it really is something that was driven by staff and really isn't something that's real time sensitive. So that was one of the projects. And then we also are planning to build a new dog park out at Family Park as part of our capital program. But if you remember, we also had a third dog park that we identified for future development. One of the things with that third dog park, though, is that we really hadn't identified exactly where that was going to go. We talked about trying to get one on the east side. We're looking at different locations, and so that's a project because we really haven't nailed down the site that we thought we could defer a year potentially or two to be able to incorporate that project as well. And so by and large, those are the two projects we identified for essentially pushing out in the plan a little bit.
Thank you.
You bet.
Councilor Erickson?
First of all, I just want to say thank you. I've spent a lot of time the last few days trying to understand some of the lingo that is a little bit different in the project budget versus the guaranteed maximum price. And so some of the confusion was within that. And so Tracy has spent a fair amount of time answering the questions with staff that I've had. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Couple questions that I have. One was the one Kenny just asked. The second question is, we're doing the new facility, and my question is if we're going to be doing all the park improvements at the same time. So once we open, everything is done. Are the basketball courts and all? I mean, is it going to be one brand new facility, or will that take additional time?
Ultimately, when the pool opens, the plan is for all the improvements within the entire park to be totally completed.
Right. I think that's great. I think it's important. We're going to have this great facility and have the whole project done at the same time is great. I don't know who wants to answer this one. When can we expect the date of 100% of the design work done? So we know that GMP. When is that going to be nailed down?
Probably defer to Kendra.
And I understand the process in it and how it's a little bit different, but I'm just curious when we can kind of have a rough guesstimation.
Kendra Simmons, Chief Project Manager for this. So the schedule right now shows that the complete design will be done at the end of March, and then we will work with Sioux Falls Construction to identify a guaranteed maximum price, and then the contract amendment will come forward then at that point.
Perfect. And then one more question, probably for you. We talked a little bit about the contingencies that I know the city got to do some great enhancements for the event center. The contingencies, my question is where can that be used? Is it just for the aquatics facility? Is it for the parking improvements or other park amenities? Can it be used for what Councilor Jameson just referred to as the splash pad area outside?
Yes. Right.
Or are we...
So in general, the rule of thumb with project contingencies is to keep the project on budget because of unknowns. And with the event center, we were, with good construction management, we were able to actually utilize the contingency dollars for upgrades. And so, of course, that would be our hope and intent, and we'll manage the budget as best we can. But the first primary use of a contingency is to keep the project on budget. And then it would be, like Councilor Jameson recommended, going after some of those project alternates.
Okay. And is the detention pond work that's being done, is that going to be similar to what's there now? Or will there maybe be a water fountain in there? And is that something the contingency dollars would go for? Or
Right. So the detention work that's required is to satisfy the needs of that we're putting now this larger building, that footprint. And so the amount of drainage required on that site is what the detention work is going towards. At this point, there's no design for any water feature or anything like that.
Thank you.
Councilors? Councilor Jameson?
Mark, if you could help me for a second. Going through your list, it adds up to 2.8 million or so. Of these, which one do you think is the most important? Because we've only got like 650 or so left, roughly, because the audit isn't done, but roughly, what would you do first?
We put them in priority for you and so the first one that we can quickly deploy, last year was the first time we did a private contract for Techcrete. So we would do another private contract for Techcrete.
I hear you say Techcrete? I
did, you did, yes. And then...
What was that name again?
That's right.
Techcrete.
And in that contract is also joint sealing, which is important to keep our joints clean and sealed. And then also if there's some miscellaneous concrete repair that comes up, that could also come out of that. Next one is ADA improvements. And so what we would probably leverage is those two with the $650,000. I would also share with you that we've started to have good bids, and we're bidding a lot of work. And so any bid savings that we have throughout the year, we're going to go to this list as well, because many of these areas is what we would ultimately have ready. We have a lot of capacity with the contractors in this community. We're bidding work. All of our roadway work is coming in very competitive. And so as we move down the list from doing concrete repair on Minnesota Avenue, if we're able to get into that, or if we're able to do those 2 blocks of Prairie Avenue, ultimately down to the signals, this will be kind of a dual list for us, if you will. If you do appropriate additional dollars, we would start at the top, and then ultimately, as we have bid savings, we'll continue to work through the priority list.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I could, while you're up there, Mark, 8.3 million for the bridge, is that what we initially estimated for this year?
It was with engineering services, it was 9.
9 million.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that are we spending this year?
This year we'll spend about 1.5 million, and that essentially, as you look at the site, there's a railroad that traverses underneath the bridge. We need to build roads to the bridge. We have utilities that we need to relay and redirect, so there's some sanitary sewer work. There's LJ's Auto Repair that we really, for one of the phases, we've got to build them a back access to the south, down to Sioux Boulevard. So there's enough setup work before the bridge contractor can really even start. There's 2 large, what we call MSC walls that need to get built. And then there's on the northwest corner, that's a part of the bridge where we need to do some grading. So that basically encompasses it. One of the things we're able to do, since we're going to do part of it in 15 and part of it in 16, part of the feedback we got from the bridge contractors was that first phase to build the roads, redirect the utilities, build the retaining walls was a very, very, very compressed time frame. It's 12th Street. There are portions of 12th Street are the busiest street in the entire state. And so we respect that and built a schedule around it. But essentially what we'll do this year is do all that work that doesn't affect traffic, but also really sets it up for a good project this fall to bid.
Okay, so the 7.5 million roughly that you have left over, we're not redirecting any of that for any of these projects? We're going to just keep that in the bank for next year? Is that the way we typically would do this?
What we're doing is we immediately moved up 22nd in Minnesota, 11th and 2nd, and Solberg Avenue. Those 3 projects will immediately go to bid as a result of us splitting this up. And then just with the cost of that project, we were already going to have to compress some of our maintenance and our reconstruction other projects to fund that entire $9 million. And so...
Aren't those placeholders in the 2016 budget or 2017 budget? Are they already in that capital plan?
Those projects I just identified?
Correct.
They were actually in the 15 plan. But last December, when we received the 12th Street Bridge report, that told us that we needed to make corrective action right away before we would ultimately have to post. That's why those projects are designed. They were actually scheduled to go in 2015. And then once we had to reevaluate and let the 12th Street Bridge cut in line, we were pushing those out to 16.
So they are placeholders in the 2016 budget currently?
If we would have gone forward with the 12th Street Bridge in 15, they would have not gotten done likely until 16. That's right.
Is it prudent to use some of that money to do some of that work this year, since we have to budget for it again next year for the same projects?
Yes, it is prudent. All 3 of those projects are critical. We've tech-created those 2 intersections more than once, and it's going to be a stretch to take them through another year.
I guess I'm talking beyond the tech creed. I'm talking the ADA ramp improvements, the right turn lanes on 37th Street and 6th Street, the Benson Road and Westport Avenue traffic signal installations. Why don't we use some of that $7.5 million for those projects?
Just because I don't have that full $7.5 million. So that's probably a separate presentation in itself on funding the bridge. But essentially that bridge project had about just over $5 million in the major street reconstruction. Remember last year, we just recap on timing. December of 2013, we received the bridge report that said if corrective action isn't done soon, we would have to post weight limits. So December, that's right when we're starting to build our capital plan. Then we went to design right away, but we put in a placeholder of about 4.7 to 5 million, thinking that would ultimately reconstruct that bridge. There's more to that bridge than what we've learned, and so that's how that project went essentially from about an initial conceptual estimate of about 5 million up to 9 million.
So we only budgeted for 5 million this year, is that what you're telling me for 2015?
That's what I had in 15, and then what I would have had to do is look across the rest of our program and reduce maintenance, other reconstructions to ultimately fund that. So honestly, splitting 12th Street up over 2 years has been much better for our capital plan. It's gotten the engineers to really take a close look at it. They feel confident with the project we're going to do this year that we won't have to post limits on it. And then right now we're working with finance, and we're thinking that we'll rebid the bridge probably in November and then make the award. So contractor, right after the first of the year, they'll have authority. A lot of the elements of the bridge are precast, and ultimately we can get started.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
A similar question then for Tracy, if you don't mind, Tracy. You had mentioned in your presentation the archive funding, and it's been brought up before. That was a 3-part package, us, the county, and the sale of some land, and we're really the only ones. I mean, we have a contractual agreement with the county that we're going to pony up our 1.3 million when the land is sold if it's done within a certain period of time. But we're sitting there with 1.3 million in the bank. The county hasn't set aside any money from the research that we've done. That 1.3 million came from the pool plan initially. Are we prudent in keeping that in the bank for a project that we're hoping comes together? I mean, is that good fiscal policy?
I think it really depends on what the expectation is with that project, how quickly it may get going. I really don't have a good pulse on that project and how likely it is that that will happen anytime soon. It seems to be standing still from my perspective. Certainly it doesn't make sense to have dollars committed to something that may not happen for another year or 2 or 3. It really depends on how long you think it might be before that project really starts turning and something's happening. It could certainly turn out to make a lot of sense to move that 1.3 million out further in the plan at some point and utilize those dollars that are available today for higher priority purposes. But that's certainly, I think, a topic worthy of discussion.
Okay. And the county did their budget for 2015, and their money isn't allocated for this year either. So 2016 would probably be the soonest that we'd see them doing anything with that. And the reason I bring it up is because I agree with Councilor Jamison. You know, that whole splash pad area, that just made a lot of sense when I saw it. As part of the whole park plan, it kind of completed it. And I'd really hate to see that get put aside, and maybe in 5 years we'll add it. And then we're going to do more construction around a brand new pool. I know we're building it to add that on, but I was surprised that, and I use this term only 400,000 kind of loosely, but in the grand scheme of things, we've got some money here. Let's do it. We talk about doing it right. Let's really do it right. Why redo it in the future? Councilor Urbanbach?
I just would remind the chair that the county did reduce, because that third deal is relying on that sale of that property. They have reduced the asking price of the property, and they've changed the way the property is available so that the prime corner is available rather than that being where the archive would be. So there's some possibilities there. There are things that are happening there. That all being said, we're committed to putting our share in when it's time. there's no, I keep saying we have that money in the bank in case it sells tomorrow, but the construction isn't going to happen before 2016, even if it did sell tomorrow. So I don't disagree with that. I just think that we need to keep in mind that we still have that commitment. We've put our names on paper saying we're committed to that money and that project. But if it's holding back something that's as cool as this, absolutely, that's a proper conversation to have.
And I know, Director Carney, if you don't mind, you have a committee, a citizen committee that's looking at these things. Would that be a proper thing for them to talk about and discuss?
Sure.
Okay. Council, concerns, questions? Right now, I guess, what is our budget? Our plan tonight is to increase the budget by $3.9 million to allocate for the complete funding of this project, correct?
The action that will be before you tonight would be to increase the project budget by $3.3 million, with the understanding that those other projects that Don mentioned in the Parks program would be reprioritized to free up those dollars in 15 and 16 to get us to the 3.9.
Okay. Thoughts, councilors? Councilor Jamerson?
Thank you. Tracy, if just help me make it crystal clear. We're bidding and Don and others, Kendra, the pool as with the splash area in the corner there that was from the beginning thought out. We're bidding it as though we're going to build it with that. And only if the costs get over and out of this 23.9 that we go, 23.7, we go, wait a minute, we gotta cut something, that's what we're gonna cut. Is that?
It's a separate part of the bid.
Yeah, it's just
Okay, that wasn't my understanding. My understanding is we're bidding it to build it without it. And that would be an add-on.
Would actually be a second part of the bid is the way I had understood it.
The base bid, and I'll defer to my colleagues here to correct me if I get this wrong, but the base bid would not have it included. It will be designed and put out to bid as an alternate so that if there are dollars available, once more of those costs are known, then it can be put into the contract.
So what we're looking at funding tonight does not include it. It's an alternate. Correct?
It'd be an alternate, right. So things would have to really go our way to look at it maybe in very simple terms. We would have to have savings elsewhere or certainly not incur unanticipated costs so that the contingency potentially could be freed up to make that fit within the budget. And that's typically how ad alternates are used on a project. You don't know until you put some of these things out to bid just what money you're going to have to work with. This will at least be designed and we'll know the cost of it.
Councilor Jameson?
Tracy, so if tonight, if it was so recommended by this body to amend and include 600 or 500,000 to make sure that that splash pool was now included in the bidding project, we could do that, couldn't we?
So instead of 3.3, we're going to add 3.8 million.
Right.
You'd make your finance director a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because we're, as I mentioned, and I mentioned it in my comments, and I heard you comment on it too. The audit isn't finished yet, so I think we're confident that we've got 2.8 million in surplus dollars. I expect we're going to have another 650,000. We won't know that till probably the end of March when the audit is finished, sometime around then. We'd have to be willing to backtrack from that if it turns out that the audit comes back and says we don't have the full $500,000 that you might add.
What if we took that $500,000 from this money we set aside for the county archive building?
That's I suppose another alternative for you to consider. That would be, if you're going to entertain that possibility, that would be, I would think, a separate action because you're really transferring already appropriated money from one project to another. The council can do that under the charter. The council can do that by resolution. So it doesn't need to be appropriated, it's already appropriated, you're just changing the planned use of those dollars. So if that's something you would want to entertain, we could come back at a later date then and present that.
Counselor Rolfing.
I just hope that, Don, when they design that part of it, make one of the sprinkler, one of the shooter deals big enough to handle our friend down here, Greg, Counselor Davis, so he can really enjoy it.
I didn't know you liked that, Counselor Jamison.
Yeah, I do.
Any other constructive input? Okay, well, we still have things to think about and a few hours to do that. Any other comments? I believe that is our last agenda item. It is, and we will adjourn our informational meeting. The Public Services Committee meeting will begin in 10 minutes at 5:50 p.m. Meeting adjourned.